Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we're taking a look at the new Netflix animated family feature, The Mitchells versus the Machines, from the studio that brought you the Lego Movie and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. May be worth your time. We'll get into it. We're also taking a look at Amazon Prime's Without Remorse, the new Tom Clancy action thriller starring Michael B. Jordan as a beleaguered veteran with nothing to lose and everything to gain by shooting the bad guys, I guess. We're going to talk about a funny situation that's happened, came up on TikTok of all places, revolving around a certain Oscar-winning short film from this year. Just going to talk about that in the middle of the show during our Death of Cinema segment. And before all that, of course, we need to get to the news. First things first, Alamo Drafthouse making a triumphant return. Andy, what the hell is this about?
The movies are slowly coming back.
I don't believe it.
There was an announcement last week that Alamo was going to be slowly reopening a number of their theaters starting in May. Starting just actually this Friday, the Brooklyn location will open up, followed by Los Angeles and Austin at the end of the month. More in June, including the DFW area, Cedars, Lake Highlands, Richardson. Those are the ones that I've actually been to. Denver, Omaha, San Antonio, and in July they will be opening the rest of their locations in Austin, Dallas, which includes Denton, North Richland Hills, and Las Colinas, Laredo, Lubbock, San Francisco, Woodbury, which I don't know where that is, and Yonkers.
I'm very excited about this. For folks at home who may not know, maybe you don't live in a state with Alamo Drafthouse, it is a wonderful little independent theater chain that is rethinking the way people experience going to the movies. They do food, just like Movie Tavern or a Studio Movie Grill, but also they run a lot of custom imaging. They put a lot of effort and personality into kind of how they design their theaters and what you see in your pre-show and post-show. Really cool customer experience. They got drinks, it's a bar, and it's surprisingly affordable. I love going to Alamo Drafthouse. I'm stoked. My location's open in July. I'd love to try to go opening night, but I think it'll be nuts. I don't know. How do you think this reopening is going to go?
I'm excited. I mean, people are itching to go back to the theater, and I love Alamo Drafthouse, and I feel like this is really a big point in the direction of going back to normal, because the small independent theaters like Alamo have really struggled. They've had to stay closed almost this whole time, so it's a big deal that they feel confident enough to kind of open back up in time for the summer movie season. So I'm pretty excited.
Me too. I think Alamo's doing it right. I really do. I mean, not to say AMC and Cinemark and the others being open has been any kind of bad thing. Like, I think it's worked for them. It's been a bummer having to wait for Alamo because I've really wanted to go back. But they're opening, I think, at a time when more people are getting vaccinated. People are feeling a little better about mask mandates. Like, people are starting to breathe a little easier. What a wonderful time to come out and hit the pedal to the metal on the PR and the marketing and say, hey, Alamo's opening back up. Come support independent theaters. Come support your favorite movie theater. Come check out Alamo. Like, Cinemark and AMC had their swing at, hey, the theaters are open again, come back. And a lot of people kind of missed that boat. If they come in now, Alamo can really angle this to people who may have missed that and might not know it's cool to go to theaters again.
Well, it's also that they're going to be opening when the summer movie season is hitting, or right before it hits. It looks like June and July are going to be pretty big as far as new releases, so they're getting open just in time.
It's true. And I like that you're going to be able to order food and drink online now on Alamo. I think could you do that before? Was that an option?
Yeah, I think maybe they added it during the pandemic.
Yeah, like when it started to go down. Well, that'll be nice. Anyway, you can knock that out, get your tickets all in one easy purchase, grab your seat, and then your food comes right out to you. The antisocial person in me thinks that's a great idea. So more on Alamo. For more on Alamo, keep it here on Off Script. Next up, Marvel made some announcements. Very exciting things. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know all of them. Really, this came from a video that was released earlier this week about their love for the movies, right? Is that what that was?
Yeah, they released a video kind of chronicling the Marvel journey of phase 1 through 3, and also advertising new things to come in phase 4, which we know a little bit of, but we learned a lot more about. So some of the things that we already knew were Black Widow, which comes out on July 9th, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which we saw the trailer a few weeks ago, that comes out on September 3rd. So those are things that we already knew. And then some new things are, well, we got to see some footage of the Eternals, just a little bit, which is kind of their new property helmed by Chloe Zhao, Oscar winner Chloe Zhao.
Oscar winner Chloe Zhao.
And that comes out November 5th. And that's, again, we knew that boat. Now we had a little bit of footage from that. But we got a big number of new announcements for new films and new dates. So the first one that I think is new, Spider-Man No Way Home, which is the final installment, I think, in the not Peter Parker, Tom Holland Spider-Man. Spider-Man No Way Home will be opening on December 17th, 2021. Following that, we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which will open in March of 2022. Thor: Love and Thunder coming basically a year from today, May 6th, 2022. And then we have some more. This was a big one. The Black Panther sequel will be called Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and that will be coming out in July 8th, so next summer, 2022. And then the sequel to Captain Marvel is called The Marvels, with stylized S, plural, coming out November 11th in 2022 as well. And then also going into 2023, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, kind of the third installment in the Ant-Man franchise. And then finally, or not quite finally, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, long delayed from director James Gunn, May 5th, 2023. So that's 2 years from now. And then finally, we got a tease for Fantastic Four. No name, no title, no dates, but Fantastic Four did belong to 20th Century Fox, which was bought by Disney. And that property has been notoriously bad and poorly adapted, and it's into the Disney Marvel house and will be coming to us at some point.
Man, lots of big announcements. I do kind of want to just get maybe our brief thoughts on some of these. You just talking for a minute, so let me voice some interest. Definitely not a lot of footage in this video. It's all right at the end if you haven't seen it. It's like Marvel Loves the Movies, I think is the name of the video, or something like that. So you don't get a whole lot here, but it's just cool to see some logos. It's cool to see a little bit of footage, even from Eternals. That stuff's neat. I'm still interested in the properties they've already announced. Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness has my eye like nothing else, man. I want to know. I want to know so bad what's going on in that movie. Thor: Love and Thunder looks cool. I'm excited to see Natalie Portman as the mighty Thor, and Christian Bale in a Marvel movie as the villain Gore the God Butcher. That'll be cool. Black Panther's Wakanda Forever, obviously a big announcement. I guess I kind of thought it was just going to be called like Black Panther 2. It sounds like maybe they're taking a different approach. I think that's okay.
If you notice, they stay away from things like a lot of times, like
Iron Man 2,
1,
Iron Man 3, yes.
Yeah. Aside from Iron Man, just because it's the reason they do that is if you number your sequels, people feel like they have to see the movies prior, and if you don't, they feel like they can kind of jump in.
Which, to be fair, I know a couple of people who haven't seen a lot of Marvel movies, and they 110% feel that way regardless. They're like, well, I've only seen 4 of them, and there's like 20, so I'm not caught up, and I don't go see any of them. But yeah, I do understand the psychological aspect angling that way. I don't know. And plus, it leaves a bit of mystery, right? People don't know what direction necessarily Black Panther is headed now that Chadwick Boseman won't be in the next feature. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it lets people wonder a little bit. Okay, where are we going? Who's going to kind of pick it up? If anybody, or is it
right? Yeah. It's just a lot more memorable. Like I can remember, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Civil War. Those properties are much more memorable than if they were just 2 and 3.
Civil War also 100% should have been an Avengers title, but I
Avengers Junior.
Avengers, the Diet Avengers. The Marvels is exciting. I'm gonna be honest. I saw the cover. I saw the logo for this and thought, oh no, Carol Danvers is going to be a mom and have to juggle 2 baby superhero kids, and it's going to be the Marvel family. What have they done to Captain Marvel? But now somebody's quick to point out the S in the Marvels looks like it's from Miss Marvel. Between the introduction of possibly a Miss Marvel, we've got Carol Danvers as the Captain Marvel, and then
Maria
what's
Rambeau?
Her name? Monica Rambeau from WandaVision doing her thing. We got some heroes going on in the Marvels. I like it. All right, we got some juice. So, good stuff. Otherwise, I think these are all exciting.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy is that we still haven't really gotten to Phase 4 because everything that we've seen so far from Marvel. Well, we had a year break because of the end of Endgame, and then we kind of had epilogue films like Spider-Man: Far From Home is still kind of a tag to Phase 3. Ant-Man, did Ant-Man and the Wasp? There's a couple of that came after. I can't remember all of them, but
I'm not sure.
We haven't really, and even Black Widow, like even though it's a prequel film, so technically it takes place within the first 3 Marvel phases. So we haven't really even gotten to the next stage, which the first movie will really be Shang-Chi, which comes out in September, and then the Eternals is kind of the big one. But this is exciting because this is like being at the beginning of Marvel when they were announcing all their titles, because I mean we're just getting started, and right now we have 2 years worth of films.
Yeah, and I wish there was a way to kind of they could angle that in advertising a little bit to let people know, hey, if you didn't watch the first 22 Marvel movies, like you don't have to. You can kind of jump in here. It's like when DC started doing reissues of comics way back when, the New 52, and that's when you told me, hey, if you haven't read any Batman, now's the best time ever to jump into Batman, and I was like, oh, awesome, and totally jumped on the bandwagon. I wish they kind of angle it that way too. We'll see though. I mean, we'll see. Yeah, much more Marvel news coming down the pipeline in the future.
It's to find out more. Yeah, it's a lot of movies. So in 6 months, we're gonna have 4, like between July and December, we're gonna have 4 Marvel films.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, we're kind of, and it's run together largely because of the pandemic. But that's how we are with Marvel stuff. Big announcement.
Yeah, big announcement. We'll see what's happening. But of course, the first one is Black Widow coming July 9th. And man, we'll find out. I feel like something big is going on in that movie. I just got a feeling. It feels like the first movie of Phase 4. It's got to be something unique, right? I don't know, but we'll see. And with that, we should probably jump out of the news and into our first review. Andy's going to be taking the summary on this one. Andy, you feeling limber? How do you feel about this?
I'm ready.
All right, Andy, please take it away.
Tom Clancy's Without Remorse. So this is the latest action espionage government spy film Without Remorse from the Tom Clancy brand, famous for such hits as Clear and Present Danger and Patriot games from the 90s. Also very heavily influenced in the video game world, lots of things like Rainbow Six or The Division. Anyways, our story centers on Navy SEAL John Kelly, played by Michael B. Jordan. At the beginning of the film, him and his team do a mission over in Syria, and after coming home, the SEAL team is targeted by assassins. So there's someone cutting grass outside, by the way, so I'm sorry if that bleeds over.
Oh, I thought you were talking about here. I was like, no, there isn't. I don't hear anything. I'm not sure if Facebook can, but you sound good to me.
So anyways, the Navy SEAL team is targeted by assassins. Several are killed. Michael B. Jordan, he is made a target. His entire family is killed, and he is left for dead. He survives enough to and go eventually goes after the people responsible and uncovers a plot against America. Very kind of generic plot, but a lot of good action scenes, a lot to talk about. Zach, what'd you think?
So I didn't like this movie. This movie okay. It's so paint by numbers, dude. Like I feel like yes, like it you just watch the trailer and it checks every box for like what you would expect in a generic action military based thriller nowadays, right? You've got a weathered veteran who has done a lot of bad overseas, but now is back home and is just trying to get away from it. You have a family who is of course going to be dispatched just to upset this individual. You've got bad guys from some foreign country who are going to dispatch the family to make the veteran mad, and you've got a plot that's driven by a veteran who's angry that his family's been dispatched by a bunch of foreign individuals and is going to go extract revenge accordingly. Like it's just this movie feels long. It feels overdone. There's a couple of cool scenes, I'll be honest. There's a couple of neat things going on in this movie, but overall, like it just feels really bland. It just doesn't feel like it does anything new or different. Really bummed by this one. So let's talk about it, right? What's the best place to get started?
Well, let's go with our plot. Like I said, there's, elite SEAL team. They're all targeted by assassins. Michael B. Jordan goes on the hunt to see, who killed his family, who tried to kill him. He ends up kind of going rogue, but then recruited. Ends up back overseas, and everything is really generic. And like I said, it's like if you took a bag and filled it with words of the spy genre and just shook it up and just threw it out on
Yes.
it's
Yes.
KGB, FSB,
Yeah.
Soviets, Russians,
Russia,
espionage,
Syria,
Navy SEAL,
terrorists,
Army,
extraction.
intelligence. Yeah, it's just
ridiculous.
throw all that on, and that's an incredibly interesting genre, but it's just so paint by number. It's so generic. It's so uninteresting. When the quote unquote reveals come, you're not surprised at all. You're like, oh no, I didn't realize he was actually the bad guy. It's also, you don't care. It's not an interesting, the plot to be discovered is not very interested either at all. So it's just not very interesting. And when I think of these kinds of movies, I think of much better versions, things like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Zero Dark 30, The Hurt Locker, these kinds of more just deeper films that are ask kind of more probing questions. The Report also came to mind, which we watched last year.
Yeah, this movie is like a less thoughtful version of John Wick. Like that's really the big lean to. And I know John Wick is not by any means the first film to kind of follow this formula, but this one like leans harder into the military angle because that's Tom Clancy. That was his thing. He was like a military espionage writer. This is based on one of his books, or say Without Remorse, of the same name. That was his 7th book in his bibliography, which is early for Tom Clancy. Also worth mentioning, this is almost nothing like the book at all. Almost nothing. It is very, very different plot. In the book, his wife dies in a car accident, and then he picks up a hitchhiker who's a chick, and then the whole thing is about this hitchhiker who he really cares about. Like completely different thing. There's like pimps and a drug ring, like completely different. But whatever. Like the Amazon has kind of taken this idea and flipped it. It's just so like, I'm not even sure what direction I was headed in before I was talking about how different the book is.
His wife totally gets fridged.
Yes, his fridge, like yes. His wife gets canned. He's super upset. The government's like, you can't do anything about it. You're decommissioned, and he's like, I'm gonna do it anyway. I got nothing to live for.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh, it's 2 hours. It's just too long. It's just anyway.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Michael B. Jordan.
Well, I was gonna say there are good performances. Michael B. Jordan, yes, but he's almost too good. He's like, he's overacting a little bit, and it's like the story and plot aren't worthy of what he's bringing to it. Other notable stars are Guy Pearce, who plays a senator, Jamie Bell, who's another Navy SEAL person or CIA kind of director who's a little shady, and then Jodie Turner-Smith, who was in Queen and Slim from the other year, really brilliant. She plays a SEAL as well, and it's a good thing for representation because you often don't have female, especially female people of color in these kind of Navy SEAL roles. So that's the cast is good. The cast is stacked. They're just not given a lot to work with.
It's true. You're totally right on Michael B. Jordan. He almost overdoes it. And the film does a really poor job of keeping up with him because it spends a lot of time with him being like distant, and his motivations become kind of unclear. Like at some point, he kind of just explains to Jodie Turner-Smith's character, who he kind of confides in throughout the film, that he basically has nothing to live for and doesn't care. And that's most of the movie. And it's like, you're an awfully uninteresting protagonist if you're just determined to die. It's there's just not a whole lot there. I think there's an angle for that, but he's just so like steeped in darkness and brooding that it almost oversells it. It's almost too much, and that doesn't quite feel nuanced enough for what I think this could have been. Jodie Turner-Smith's great. Jamie Bell is pretty solid, and Guy Pearce is Guy Pearce, who I love in pretty much everything. Solid casting. I do wonder if there was a mistake in the screenwriting. Because like I said, this is based on a book. It's very different. This screenplay is written by Taylor Sheridan, who's supposed to be like a god among screenwriters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like where this movie does succeed is in the action sequences, and I feel like the plot and script are just written to get us to the action sequences, which are really good, and I think that's worth talking about. There's an opening mission that's really good. There's there's this kind of home invasion section, and then there's another mission that happens overseas, and there's a part where they're in a plane and plane where they have to escape kind of a dangerous situation on this plane, which is also really good. So the action stuff is really top notch, and that's where kind of the realism, like they're all dressed in the gear.
Yes.
Like if you play, like because I play PUBG, I recognize a lot of their gear.
Yeah, right.
But like that's the kind of stuff that does work well. At the same time, some of these action sequences kind of go on forever, and they also feel a little meaningless because just like the plot is so uninteresting.
Yeah, and they all feel like they have to jump the shark a little bit, right? They have to try to outdo like the films that have come before them. There's actually a scene I really like towards the end of the first act of the film when Michael B. Jordan's character John Kelly, just most generic protagonist name. Anyway, John Kelly wants to interrogate a particularly heinous individual, and he manages to get the guy's car stopped in traffic, and then lights his car on fire with a bunch of gasoline, and then to interrogate him, hops in the back seat with him while the car's on fire. And they have this very tense like interrogation scene. It's in the trailer. It's really great. And yeah, like you said, there's the airplane scene. The action stuff works pretty good. Like that stuff works great. But man, everything around it is just a drag. Like it just doesn't. And I'm not sure why. Oh, Andy's not on the stream. Oh gosh. Wait, Andy, where'd you go? I can't carry this by myself. Okay, you know what? I'll just keep talking. Maybe he'll reconnect. It's just kind of a drag, man. Like it doesn't really end up going anywhere. And I know I feel like I'm talking in circles when I explain this, but it's true. I'm frustrated by this because of the screenwriting, right? Like I said, this was Taylor Sheridan who wrote this. He's worked on films like Sicario and Yellowstone, the show, and I'm not sure what else, but otherwise he's been pretty praised as a screenwriter. And I feel like lately he's either just missing big, or maybe he just had a little bit of beginner's luck and now it's not happening anymore, because this one just does not do the job. I mean, I know I said the book is a far cry from what this is, but let's look at the facts. This movie is a former Navy SEAL who's mad at a bunch of Russian nationalists, right? Okay, goes to Russia, or I'm not even sure if he ends up in Russia. Yeah, he ends up in Russia, Syria. Somehow he's in Syria shooting at Russians. I don't even know how that connection gets made, but it does. He's over shooting at bad guys, wearing his Navy SEAL stuff. Neat. The book, it's a guy shooting at drug dealers in Baltimore, like taking out a big drug ring. I'm like, that's much more interesting. Much more intriguing. John Wick was good at that. Like it's a much smaller story, and it makes it a little bit more intimate, makes it a bit more sincere. Without Remorse tries to put this fight on the world stage, and ultimately it's just a bit of a miss. Like it doesn't. I just don't care. I'm watching a 2-hour movie on Amazon Prime. I don't need this thing to be the end all be all of what the future is going to be. Andy's back. Andy, did you catch any of that at all?
I did. Yeah, I got cut there for a second.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah, like you said, it's so uninteresting, and yeah. Even though there's all these action sequences, I totally get bored in the middle of it because it's just, again, it's too long. Action sequences are good, but they go on for too long, and the story's just not interesting. When I think of another thing that came to mind was Munich, which is also kind of a spy hunting down people, who committed an act of terrorism. And so much more. And that, it's a very different, very deep film. That was like an Oscar winner. But this is it's so bland, so forgettable.
Yeah, it's so funny. You mentioned last night when we were talking about this. You mentioned the movie The Report from Amazon Prime, right, starring Adam Driver, which is about him kind of, yeah,
the CIA's interrogation program.
Yes. Yeah. And him trying to kind of declassify what's been going on around 9/11 and torture that CIA has been committing. There's like very little combat action in that movie. Almost none at all. You get a few flashes of some things going on in Iraq or Afghanistan, and that's about it. But somehow is much more narratively engaging and interesting. And it's not just because Adam Driver's in the movie. Like it's because it's written sharper, and it doesn't lean on like generic action from an action star to be interesting. Maybe I'm overreading an action movie, but the fact is, like, this movie is just trying to be something it isn't. I feel like it should be more like, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger energy and less like captivating thriller,
Yeah, I mean,
political
it's just
energy.
so
It just
middle of the
doesn't.
road. Like
Yeah.
it's either gotta, yeah, up the camp and be a Schwarzenegger type film, or just be deeper and be a more interesting spy thriller.
Yeah, I'm not sure who exactly they're making this for. Like, I feel like if my dad watched this at home, he'd tell me, "Oh, I watched that movie without remorse," and say, "I was." It'd be like boring, like nothing really happens. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's weird, man. Normally, I feel like when we watch a movie for the show, usually one of us has something relatively glowing to say about it. But this one, I just left a bad taste in my mouth. I don't know how that happens. Yeah. Anyway, any other thoughts for recommendations? I mean, what do you?
I'm ready.
I wish I wasn't ready, but I think that's all I have to say. Andy, would you recommend Amazon Prime's Without Remorse?
I'm gonna say pass. No caveats even. It's just not very interesting. It's boring. There's way more interesting things to watch, and it's generic spy action thriller. You know, you can go to watch John Wick, or like I said, Zero Dark 30. It's not even interesting enough to like say, save it for streaming. Like I would skip it for streaming.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I wish I didn't have to feel that way. Like I feel like the people involved really cared about the performances, but like it's just bland. Pass, hard pass. Don't wait for streaming. Don't go look for it on Amazon Prime. Like there's just nothing here going on that's particularly interesting. If you want a captivating Michael B. Jordan performance from something he's done recently, go check out like Fahrenheit 911 on Fahrenheit 451 on HBO Max. Like at least that's different. Like at least that's something unique because there's something going on there. Or yeah, go check out something like John Wick or Zero Dark 30 or The Report on Amazon Prime. Like there's other films and other genres that have done this so much better. This one's just real paint by numbers. So that's Without Remorse. With that, we should probably move into our next segment. Andy, you might give me a brief introduction.
It's time for the death of cinema.
All right. So this week on the death of cinema, we've got a particularly interesting topic. I'm excited to kind of talk about this. I pulled it up in an article so we can at least see it. For those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, we stream the show every Tuesday afternoon at 5 p.m. CST. You should join us, follow the page, keep up with what we're doing so you can see our smiling faces. Anyway, our death of cinema story this week is this. Cynthia Cao, a short film director, has suggested that Netflix's Oscar-winning police brutality film Two Distant Strangers has copied her idea. In a TikTok of all places, I think last Tuesday morning, Cynthia Cao posted a video of herself explaining that she had recently, or about 4 years ago, directed a short called, I've got the name of it somewhere on here, Groundhog Day for a Black Man. That's it. It's a short about a black man in the city who runs into a cop and ends up I think being murdered by the cop under unfortunate circumstances. Afterwards, he immediately wakes up. It's that morning, and just like Groundhog Day, just like the Bill Murray
Relives
classic,
the day. Yeah.
relives the day, runs into the cop again, has the same problem. He has to try to get out of this loop, right? That's the deal. It's Groundhog Day for a black man. It's in the title. Very simple. Cynthia Cao was surprised to find after she published her short that Now This Entertainment, who is very popular on Facebook and Twitter for their political posts and videos, you've probably seen them. It's a yellow logo, it's square. Now This reached out to her via email and said, "Hey, we loved your short. We saw it. We'd love to post it on our channels as well. Are you cool with that? We'll boost you and credit you." She said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Actually, get some awareness out. That sounds good. It's a really good message." So Now This shares it with their platform. It gets a bunch of views on Facebook, gets a bunch of views on Twitter, and she doesn't think much of it. Well, earlier this year, she is perusing Netflix and she sees Two Distant Strangers, a new short on Netflix that looks interesting. So she watches it, and it turns out it's got almost the same plot as her original short, Groundhog Day for a Black Man. What's particularly interesting about this is Two Distant Strangers is produced in coordination with Now This Entertainment. Now, upon being reached for comment, Now This has claimed that they were in production with this short long before they ever bothered to reach out to her, and that can't possibly be related, that this is just coincidental. Additionally, the writer and co-director of the short, Trayvon Free, has gone on to say that he also came up with this on his own. He didn't say that in response to this. He said that originally in interviews past. He said that he kind of created this idea on his own. This was his own thing. What's particularly compelling about this, and Cynthia Cao is not accusing them of stealing her idea. She said at the end of the TikTok, she said, "I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm just pointing out that this is coincidental. That's all." What's interesting about this is Two Distant Strangers has now won an Oscar. for writing and directing. And the people who wrote and directed it have accepted Oscars and have posted about this on their Twitter and have flexed that they have really accomplished something. And perhaps they have, right? They're not the first people to come up with this Groundhog Day idea. The question is, Andy, what's the deal, right?
So it can be very difficult to prove if someone has stolen your idea. Disney deals with this quite a lot. I think the example I see a lot is Inside Out, the Disney Pixar film with these anthropomorphic emotional characters. Many people have come forward and said, hey, I wrote a book that had that same idea and I wrote it and published it before Disney came out with theirs. They've clearly stolen from me. That happens a lot, but copyright law is a funny thing, and it can be very difficult to prove someone stole something from you, and you have to meet certain criteria when that happens. First of all, publishing something actually hurts you. It actually works against you. Most people think, well, if you published it and then someone else publishes it, you've clearly done it first. But actually, when you publish something, that makes it publicly available, and you're allowed to be inspired by existing works. So if I make something that's similar to something that's already out there, that's okay. I'm allowed to do that as long as you're not, ripping like character names, that sort of things. Like if you're getting really, really specific where you're directly you basically have to directly copy something. And if you're not, it can be very difficult because like I said, you're allowed to be inspired. The other thing is, so you would have to not publish your work. The other thing, you have to prove that you were like maybe in discussions with said company. So like, let's say I wrote a book and I had one-on-one meetings with Disney Pixar, and they were, saying, yeah, we're interested in your idea. We want to use it for a film. And then they just didn't. They say, you know what, we're not going to use it. And then they go ahead and publish a film that's exactly my idea. Something like that, because you could prove that you had one-on-one meetings. But most of these, that never happens. No one ever has meetings with Disney. So I don't, unfortunately, I don't think, is it Miss Cow?
Yeah, Cynthia Cow.
Yeah, I don't think Cynthia Cow has a very strong case because it's just essentially it's coincidental. And yes, it looks like it looks like a direct ripoff. It looks like they were very much took the idea and just made a much higher production value version of it. But like I said, it may not hold up in court. This is a little bit different because the fact that now this news did reach out to her and that now this news is credited in the Netflix short, that might kind of tie in a little bit more. And again, that's kind of where the courts will decide. But essentially it's going to be both sides are going to have to prove like when they created their ideas, how they got there. And Netflix will never, that's the difficult part is the person who steals your idea generally is not going to admit to stealing it or anything they're ever being inspired. Another good example is Duke Kaboom from Toy Story 4, the Evel Knievel type character.
Yeah, played by Keanu Reeves. Yeah.
Right. That character was obviously inspired by Evel Knievel, but at no point did they ever say that. They never said Keanu Reeves was sure to never say, he just said he's a motorcycle stunt guy. They never said, oh, he's an Evel Knievel guy. And they still got sued by Evel Knievel's estate. But it's, just because things are similar doesn't mean you copied them, or doesn't mean that it will hold up to that you have a copyright claim. It's very difficult to win, especially against the big guys.
Yeah, and I think
I do think they ripped her. But I do think they ripped her off.
Okay. Well, thank you for the editorial. Yeah, I don't think she's gonna get anything out of this for sure. Like you're absolutely right. Like that's just not how it works. And I've got some pretty liberal views on how that should work, but it's not the way it is in America. You're right. You're welcome to be inspired by anything. And the fact is, she didn't invent the Groundhog Day idea. So if she could sue them for stealing that idea, couldn't somebody sue her for stealing their idea? This is turtles all the way down. So. Yeah. There's no good answer. And really, there's no way to know what exactly happened. You're right. It could be 100% coincidence. There are 5 years difference between productions here. Mm-hmm. 5 years. A lot of people come up with a lot of ideas in 5 years. Like there's a lot going on there. And the fact is Trayvon Free has been working in entertainment for his whole life. He was a writer on Comedy Central. He was involved with The Daily Show. I used to watch videos of him on YouTube like a decade ago. Like, he has been working at this for a really long time. So if he stole an idea to springboard into getting an Oscar, he either did a really, really good job or it just happens to be a coincidence.
Right.
And the
Well,
odds are it's probably a coincidence.
what? Yeah. Well, and the other thing is like we have remakes all the time. You're allowed to remake things. What you can't do is copy things like character names or scene shot for shot scenes, which in film that's very difficult. In music, that's a little bit more understandable. You can say, okay, this sounds exactly like this. Katy Perry recently lost a lawsuit because she had like 4 notes and like there was only like 1 note different, and she lost the lawsuit. But you can, that's almost a direct copy. But in film, it's so much different because you're filming things, it's putting it on camera. Like there's so much variation, it's hard to copy. And again, you would have to, if you did things like, if you tried to create a character called Batman, with a real famous name, that's the other part. Finally, you have to show damages for a lot of the stuff. You have to show loss of income, loss of money somewhere. And unless you've actually like sold and licensed your property and are making money off of it, again, you're not going to really have a claim. It's like, great, you wrote a book that no one's bought, so you don't really have a leg to stand on.
Yeah. And that's frustrating, I think, for creators. I know there's stand-up comedians who get their jokes stolen all of the time, right? Like this is just kind of the way it is, and there's no good answer for it. But also, we wouldn't be able to have films like we do without this system in place. So I don't know. There's really no good resolution to this one, I guess. We'll keep an eye on it just to see if anything pans out as far as it's concerned. But it's just an odd thing. It's an odd thing for an Oscar-winning short to immediately be accused of theft. I mean, not even really accused, just pointed out to have immediate similarities with something 5 years older, and maybe they didn't steal it, right? Maybe it's just coincidence. But I mean, just her YouTube video alone at the time of her posting that TikTok had 3.5 million views. That's not even including Now This Is push on PR. So there are well over millions of eyes looking at that thing. So, yeah. I mean, who knows? Somebody probably saw it. And the fact that Now This is involved is awfully suspect. You're right. That's very strange.
Yeah. The best thing that she can do is, try to create a negative PR campaign against Netflix or Now This News. Getting like the sympathy, getting the public to see it is probably going to help her more than anything. Dave Chappelle recently went on a big PR thing about his show and Comedy Central, and it turned around and they paid him. So this is probably her best approach, because who knows, she may not have a legal standing or much of a legal standing, but if she can create enough negative press for Netflix, that might, maybe make them settle with her in some way.
Yeah. Well, keep it here on Off Script for more, I guess. I wish I had more to say about it. But
sorry, I had one more thing. So the other thing is, like, you can't copyright ideas themselves. You have to create some sort of like physical thing, like for instance, a script, or if you film a movie, or like you got to write it down somewhere and then copyright that thing. So just like the generic idea of like Groundhog Day for a Black Man, which is just the title, that's just an idea. You can't copyright it. She can copyright her film. She can copyright her script. And if those things are copied, she has a claim. But the idea itself, you can't really copyright.
All right. So what if I jot down my idea and I make it an NFT and then I trade it on the blockchain?
You'll put it on the blockchain.
That's right. Hey, that's mine forever.
There was another case where someone pitched a movie idea on Twitter, and a studio actually picked it up. And then that person sued and wanted to get paid and said, hey, this was my idea. They took it and they lost, because it's like, well, that's great that you had the idea. You didn't do anything with it. You didn't make the movie. Right. You didn't create the script. You didn't, you got to copyright it, man.
Ain't intellectual property grand, man. Oh man,
it is. Anyway, never share your great ideas.
That's right. I'm glad we have a marketplace of free ideas that we can exchange freely, I guess, and make money on. Anyway, that's the story. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just odd. Just an odd thing to happen. So we thought it might be worth highlighting. And a good lesson in copyright law. Andy's right. He knows this stuff way better than I do. There's been way too many instances of this in our lifetimes where it's worth keeping an eye on, I think.
Yeah.
And with that, Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
Sorry. And a lot of people just don't understand a lot of the nuances of copyright law. They just,
Yes.
again think, well, I published this and then someone else made a movie about it and it's clearly all these similar things. But again, that doesn't mean it's stolen. That doesn't mean you have a copyright claim.
It's true, myself included. I'm no copyright expert. Andy has mansplained this to me a number of times, and I will continue to ask because I don't get it, but it's the way it is. Anyway, we should move on to our final review of the episode. I'm going to be taking the summary on this, so please excuse any clumsy deliveries. The movie is Netflix's The Mitchells versus the Machines. So The Mitchells versus the Machines is the story of Katie Mitchell, a quirky, just about to go to high school girl who's excited to be going to film school in California. She has a brother named Aaron, a little younger than her, loves dinosaurs. She's got a mom named Linda, first grade teacher, a little stressed out. She's got a dad named Rick, who's an outdoorsman who just does not want to live in the city. The four of them are a very nuclear, dysfunctional family, right? Self-proclaimed in the film. But on their road trip to drop Katie off at college, some things go wrong, and suddenly they find themselves in the middle of a robot apocalypse, and suddenly the Mitchells are humanity's unlikeliest last hope for survival. The movie has a lot to say about technology and family and staying together. Originally, it was a feature called Connected that was supposed to come out in 2020 from Sony Pictures, but it got picked up by Netflix after the pandemic, kind of shut it down, and they didn't know where they're going to release it. They changed the name from Connected to The Mitchells versus the Machines. I'm excited to jump into it. Oh, and one more detail before we get into it. It is made by the studio who produced the Lego Movie and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It is produced by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. Lots of big names behind this one. Andy, I'm excited to jump into it. What did you think of The Mitchells versus the Machines?
So I watched this in two parts, and when I started it, the first half I really couldn't get into. It seemed really generic. You have this kind of dysfunctional family who doesn't get along. Daughter's not getting along with the father going off to college. Reminds me a little bit of Lady Bird. And then this machine uprising happens really quickly. And, there's a lot of cheesy jokes. I wasn't really into it, but the second half of this really turns around and I really liked it. And then there's a lot of good gags. There's a lot of funny jokes, really good animation, really interesting animation. There's a lot of this that I was like, wow, I wish I could have seen this on the big screen. It would have been really cool. It's the opposite of Without Remorse, which I couldn't have seen it on a smaller screen if I wanted to. So in the end, I ended up really liking it. And there's, like I said, really good writing. It's funny, good voice acting, and really great animation.
It's funny. I'm in the exact same boat. The first half of this movie does not work great. The second half, gangbusters, works awesome. And it was unclear as to why that was. It's just under 2 hours, an hour 54. I did the same thing. I didn't watch it fully in two parts, but I stopped at about an hour in to go to the bathroom, and I was watching it with Christine, and I told her, I said, I don't know where this movie's going. She said, it's an animated family movie. It's pretty easy. I'm like, no, I mean, it's just been jumping through so many hoops. I didn't understand where it was headed. So let's jump into it and talk about our plot. This movie has a lot to juggle, just off the top. I think I mentioned it's a CGI animated film, right? Family feature, so we know what we're getting into, just so you have a picture in your head if you're listening to the audio podcast. We open with Katie, right, who wants to go to film school. She's quirky, she's weird, she's different. Then we get her family. They're all quirky, they're all a little weird, they're all a little different. They don't really talk to each other. They're all on their phones all the time. Then we get a quick slide over to essentially Google or Apple or Tesla or Amazon, what is supposed to be like this giant technology company that runs the world with their phones and their search engines and their cars. And it's called PAL, P-A-L, and they're debuting a new type of robot. It's like a replacement for smartphones. But things go wrong and these robots turn evil. And then we get back to Katie and the family, and she's going to college tomorrow, and her and her dad had this weird fight. Then we go back to the tech company, and they're figuring stuff out on their end, and the robots are bad. What do we do? Then back to the family. We're going on a road trip. Then they go on a road trip. Then the robots take over. It's just a lot. And that first hour is like a real juggle. It's a lot for a kids movie to kind of pick up and run with. But once we get into like the robot apocalypse proper, then it's great. Then you're getting like solid gags. Our family has motivation. They're sticking together, trying to save the world. They're trying to get to the bottom of this mystery of this robot apocalypse. That stuff's all good stuff. Anyway, what do you think? Am I doing okay with the plot so far?
No, I agree. There's a ton going on. The robot apocalypse happens very quickly, like 20 minutes into the film. The dysfunction of the family, like I said, is feels really generic. It kind of takes a while to find its footing, but when it does, it's really good because like the sisters not get along with the dad or the brother, but the mother's trying to facilitate all this, and throughout the film they're working through these issues, because they realize their issues. They don't want to not have a relationship. They get some help from outside sources and very painstakingly work through their issues, kind of resolve things. Meanwhile, saving the world. And there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of good tech gags. If you're a tech person, you work on websites or a programmer, definitely, I think, laugh at a lot of it. There's also a lot of old humor. Like there's this whole thing involving Furbies, which if you didn't grow up in like the 90s, you may not know what a Furby even is, which
Yeah.
it was this furry doll thing that was back when there used to be huge, like every Christmas there would be one huge toy that everyone just wanted and it was impossible to get. And one Christmas it was the Furby, and somehow that stuck around in pop culture.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a wide variety of gags here. I think obviously being a family feature, you're trying to cater to both like the adults and the kids, but it also tries to thread that needle with Katie being a kind of audience angle. I think they're going for kids that are in high school, just like everybody, right? We want the young kids, we want high school, college kids, we want parents. Everybody can enjoy Mitchells versus the Machines. That's the idea, but it almost misses the mark a little bit. At least in that first half, I was bumpy. I didn't laugh a lot. I was like, man, it's just trying to spin too many plates. We got too many motivations and too many plots going on here. But when all that gets pushed aside for the Metalocalypse, then we're back on board and we're in a good spot. It definitely has a lot of great writing. I was, at least in that second half, and then some good stuff in the first one, a lot of good gag writing and beat for beat stuff. I was surprised to see. For any fans of the Cartoon Network show Gravity Falls, we've never talked about it on this show before, but if you've watched it and you've seen it, this was written and directed by two writers and directors of that show. And Gravity Falls, Andy, if you don't know, is kind of a very cult acclaimed show on Cartoon Network for being kind of odd and quirky and different. But watching this and knowing it's written and directed and starring a chunk of the Gravity Falls team, it almost kind of makes sense. It starts to fall in line like, oh, now I get why this is offbeat. And now I get why this is kind of different. In a way, now I feel like I understand some of the character animation, which we'll get into in a second. That made a lot of it fall into place for me because I like that show a lot. I'd be curious to see if any listeners have watched and Gravity Falls in this. If you have, write into the show and tell us if you know anything about that, because I don't know.
Yeah, there's a wide variety of humor and gags. You got family humor, you got tech humor. The dad is not tech savvy, the daughter is very tech savvy. There's a whole thing with their dog, Munchie,
yeah,
Munchie, where there's a whole thing where the dog can't see straight. It's like has a lazy eye, and
this movie's ableist.
Yeah, and it's also the dog's also the star of all these short films that Katie Mitchell has made growing up, called Cop Dog, which are actually a lot of little asides, movie within a movie that are pretty funny. Overall, it definitely begins to work the longer it goes.
It does. There's some, like I said, some clumsy gags at the beginning. The parents definitely have some like cringeworthy humor, which I couldn't tell if that was the point or not. There's a particular gag about through halfway through the film where the dad reveals that over the years he has gifted all of the members of the family a certain brand of screwdriver, and that's like, I think it's supposed to be funny. I was watching, I was just like, all right, they all have screwdrivers, neat, like that's, I think it was supposed to be like just stuff like that that's kind of offbeat. And then other times you've got these robot characters, and I do want to talk about the technology for a second, that'll say some kind of pun or technology related gag, or they can't get on the Wi-Fi or something, and it's timed in such a way where it's really effective. And that's something I want to talk about, the technology angle of this, because that's a big part of it. On the one half of this movie, we have a dysfunctional family who's trying to come together. On the other half, we have a scathing criticism of like wokeness and technology and what it means to be connected to your phone all the time and to see the world through a camera lens, as Katie does. It's definitely some interesting messaging around that, and in a little bit, I felt it was trying to tell kids to put their phones down, but at the same time, it was encouraging parents to pick them up and connect with your kids in the platform.
Relate, fellow kids.
It's right. Yeah, the future's now, old man. What did you think about that?
No, the it's interesting. Well, because you're watching, like, you're using your streaming technology to watch a digital film and then telling people to get away from screens. It's kind of weird, mixed messy, but it's also, we have to remember that this is really aimed at a young audience, and I would say probably a little bit younger than even the Lego movie. That's why we get some of this humor that's, I think, a little kind of seems a little dumb or a little cringy to us, is probably hilarious for kids. And the messaging about, take a break from your screens, it's very plain and simple because, like I said, it's aimed at younger audiences.
Yeah, and it does some clever things later in the film. Like I said, when it kind of gets going, there's a great scene I was telling Andy about at the end of the movie that I really liked when the families kind of come together and they're like, well, we see each other and we understand how each other works. And then one of the kind of the robot overlords pulls up like their internet search history and looks at all of their videos and videos Katie has made and statuses they posted, and the AI explains to them like, you're all faking it. None of you are real. You're all dysfunctional. You're all trying to act like you get along, but really you don't. And this is how you really feel. It's really profound. It's a really profound moment from this movie to step back and say, hey, no, what you post on the internet matters. And how you present yourself may not be real. How other people present themselves is probably false. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. It's a surprisingly profound message for what most of this movie feels like it's going to be. And that's when I think it's important to remember who made this movie. This is the Lego movie, and this is the Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, two films that otherwise have been uncontestedly fantastically received. I mean, I remember walking out of Spider-Verse thinking this is some of the best animation I've seen in a decade. And this movie definitely tries to go that way with the animation. It's got a very unique style. And any thoughts on that before I jump in on my hot takes on the animation?
Yeah, so we get a lot of just CGI type animation, a lot of action scenes, but we also have overlaid while characters are talking and thinking, are just kind of 2D hand drawn things that pop up again, a lot like Into the Spider-Verse, and that gives it a very different style because it's very much a hand drawn aesthetic as opposed to just purely CGI.
Yeah, that was a really interesting angle. I didn't love it. I felt like it lacked some kind of confidence. I don't know. I really like just kind of the basic animation without the hand drawn stuff laid on top, which is cool and adds some really good visual flair in moments of speed and depth. I wanted to highlight how great I thought just kind of the standard computer animation is under everything. The humans in this movie, the Mitchells and every other human, they're incredibly imperfect. All of their heads and shapes and silhouettes are misshapen. Nobody is perfect. I mean, even down to the pupils of their eyes are not perfect circles or ovals. They're angled a little bit, and they're just a little jagged, and they're not quite cut out right. Meanwhile, the robots, perfect lines every time. Everything is geometric. Everything is square. Everything comes to an edge. Everything is very, very, very particular. And it's a good visual distinction. Not only do we have that throughout our film between animals and people and robots and anybody else interacting. Additionally, once we start to get to the end game of the movie, when we're getting into the robot compound where the robots are made, all of that, you get some really, really stunning set design. One of the characters in the film comments when they get to like the robot overlord place that this looks like the cover of a Journey album. And it does. And it's incredible. I mean, you get these brilliant neon colors that are lighting our scenes, these reds and blues and teals and magentas that are very reminiscent of Spider-Verse, but really, really visually striking, really stunning for a otherwise animated family feature. Really fantastic work. Great visual timing in the comedy as well. There's a lot of jokes that only work visually on screen. The audio, audible stuff, great. But seeing a character emote how they feel really matters. And that's something the studio has done brilliantly twice. I think they succeed again here. It's the writing really in Mitchells and Machines that I think hurts it.
Right. I was going to say the animation is so good, and towards the like the third act, it's like no holds barred, and you have these giant action sequences, fight scenes, car chases, explosions. There's a big thing in a mall that's really, I mean, there's a lot going on, and it's just like a little overstimulated. And that's why I said, like, if this were in a theater, I wish I could see this in a theater because the animation would be really incredible and really overwhelming. This was originally supposed to come out in theaters, but because of the Pandora, it got sold to Netflix, as did many films.
Yeah. So let's talk about the cast real quick, and then I want to talk about why Sony sold this movie. So the cast is pretty good. They're not particularly outstanding. There's a couple standouts. Our lead, Katie Mitchell, is played by Abby Jacobson from Broad City. If you've watched that show on HBO, Danny McBride plays the father, Rick Mitchell. He's very exciting. Maya Rudolph plays the mom, Linda Mitchell. Eric Andre plays the woke tech CEO who's like 25 and is convinced that robots are going to take over the world. Olivia Colman, Academy Award winner, plays Pal, our female AI. She's like Siri, I suppose. And then we get a couple of SNL stayovers as a couple of robots, Fred Armisen and Beck Bennett as a bunch of these robots that run around. And then a ton of cameos. John Legend, Chrissy Teigen, Conan O'Brien, Blake Griffin is in this movie. Alex Hirsch, creator of Gravity Falls. There's a couple of podcasters that got voice roles in this movie. Like, really,
I love that the dog is credited as Doug the Pug.
Right. Well, Doug the Pug, naturally, of course, playing Monchi. Everybody's pretty good. Nobody's great, I don't think. I think, honestly, I think the people I liked the most were like the robots. Olivia Colman and Beck Bennett are both great. Like they feel very flat, but also like emote when necessary. The Mitchells, they're solid. Pretty good, but they're not supposed to be anything incredible, right? They're only human. So what'd you think, Andy?
Yeah, the standouts are definitely Olivia Colman as Pal. She's probably has the most recognizable voice. And like you said, the Mitchells are fine. I thought it was really funny. So Chrissy Teigen and John Legend, who are married in real life, play a family, and they're kind of the perfect family, very functional and like communicative and all these things. So it's funny that they're playing an on-screen animated couple as well.
Yeah, pitch perfect casting. I want to know at least your theory before we wrap up this review. Why did Sony sell this movie? Because the pandemic's an easy answer, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts deeper. Do you think they thought people wouldn't go for it? Did they get scared when they were running this by test audiences? Was it too different? What do you think?
Well, also, this was supposed to actually come out in the fall. So we're way after its window of opportunity. And yeah, they could have waited, but these things have a shelf life and you're just losing money the longer it sits on the shelf. So, and also, the pandemics are, it's trying not to say synonyms. The pandemic was very uncertain. It was very uncertain for a long time, and we kept opening theaters, then closing them, opening and closing them. And so it's like, the uncertainty is difficult. It's difficult to plan for. It's easy to just sell to Netflix. You recoup your costs, you get it out there, you move on.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I couldn't help but watch this, at least in that first hour, and feel like, you know what? Maybe they got scared. Because I just feel like if you put it in front of test audiences, they would have felt the same way we did. Just be like, it's kind of funny. I'm not really sure where it's going. Like it's a little confusing how every character is motivated, because there's the college thing and there's the getting back together with your family thing, and then there's the robot thing, and then like it's just a little all over the place. And I wonder if there's a longer cut of this movie, if maybe they just trimmed it for time. I don't know. I do feel like there were a couple of at least one particularly glaring edit I noticed in the movie.
It's a little long as it is.
It is. Yeah, it is a little long for sure. I noticed
it's just short of 2 hours.
About 2/3 of the way through the movie, there's a scene when the robots are explaining that they've designed a system to launch Americans off the launch Earthlings, or launch humans off planet Earth, right? Just send them somewhere else. The robots aren't going to need humans in the utopia they're going to build, right? And they frame it around this goofy commercial that's like Robot Airlines or something. I don't remember the name of it, but it pops up with a banner right at the end of this commercial. It's like Robot Airlines coming 2020. And like there's a voice line for it, and it's like Robot Airlines, and then it just fades out real fast and cuts away from the banner. And I was like, was that an edit? Did you guys do that? Because this movie is supposed to come out in 2020. That seems particularly timely. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I feel like this movie ultimately, in some weird way, hear me out, I feel like it lacks a little bit of the confidence that Into the Spider-Verse and Lego Movie had. It's just missing something. The directors Michael Randa and Jeff Rowe, they've done some episodes of Gravity Falls. Neither has ever done a feature. This is writing and directing for them. I feel like it just missed a little something. And I don't think that's bad. I think this is a good effort by them and a good effort by the studio, but it's a little like one of Studio Ghibli's lesser known films, or like a Disney movie that didn't quite make masterpiece status. It's very good, but I don't feel like it's as good as its predecessors for sure.
Yeah, it's good. It's not great. I mean,
Yes.
Into the Spider-Verse is a masterpiece. That was like one of my favorite movies of the previous decade.
Right.
Really incredible animation, but more importantly, storytelling, really powerful. And the Lego movie, so much fun. So, a huge hit, huge surprise. So the bar is really high, but this is still really good, I think, in its own right.
I do too, and I'm excited to get to recommendations. Andy, would you recommend Mitchell's versus the Machines?
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. It's funny. It's entertaining. It's a little slow in the beginning. It gets better the longer it goes. It's fun for the whole family, good for the kids. And it's available on streaming. So it's definitely highly recommended by me.
I'm in the same boat. I'd totally recommend this one. Great for date night, great for hanging out with the fam, great for the kids. Like, this one feels really good and even keel all across the board. I'm glad it's going to be in Netflix's library for a while. This is a good one to go lean back on. Add it to your watch list. If it doesn't catch your fancy, if you listen to this review and thought, it looks okay, just throw it on there. And you never know. Maybe on a rainy day, you'll give it a shot and you might see something in that first hour we didn't. It's not bad. It's not a bad hour for sure, but it's just a little disjointed, but it gets going. Once they get in the car and hit the road, things pick up real fast and it goes in a really good place. And ultimately, I think has a really satisfying emotional conclusion, just like their previous two films did, Spider-Verse and Lego Movie. So with that being said, Andy, I think that wraps our show. Do we have anything else we got to talk about? I think that's everything. Well, hold on. What are we watching next week?
Right. So next week we have a new in theater release, which is Wrath of Man, which is a new action film by Guy Ritchie, starring Jason Statham as a armored truck driver who's going after bad guys who killed his son. It's a revenge drama. It actually reminds me a little bit of about Remorse, a kind of one-man army style of John Wick. Guy Ritchie does really good. Like, this is his thing, these kinds of action movies. So I think it'll be good. And Jason Statham's always fun. You're going to get good action. The other thing, because there's not a whole lot of new streaming releases, we're going to be taking a look back at Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 1992 film by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, Keanu Reeves. These are all still big names. It's amazing. That's playing on HBO Max. I watched this again a few weeks ago, and I was like, man, this movie's really, like, it's got so much going on. There's parts that are so great and bizarre, and then other choices that are really like head scratching. And it was kind of a staple of early 90s film, but that's available on HBO Max. So we'll be watching that.
I'm definitely at least mildly looking forward to Guy Ritchie's next film. It's not called Without Remorse, Wrath of Man. God, dude, we got to talk about movies with bad titles. Both of these are just so meaningless. What do they even mean? Without Remorse and Wrath of Man. I mean, good Lord, there's just no character to what those are. I'm at least excited about Guy Ritchie's next film. I wasn't too impressed by The Gentleman, right? That was his last one, or really Aladdin. But I'm a Guy Ritchie diehard, man. Back since like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I love what that guy does. Hopefully, this one is a good return to form for him with some action. We are not watching Bram Stoker's Dracula because Andy watched it a few weeks ago. We're watching it because I've never seen it, and I know it's a big deal. I've seen the memes, and I'm excited to check it out.
Well, especially this movie just so. Growing up in the early 90s, there used to be like pay-per-view ads on the time. And so the thing is, they would just cycle the same like 3 or 4 movies all day. So I remember at one point just seeing like the preview for Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I shouldn't have been seeing at like 9 or 10, just play on repeat. And I remember it just being kind of a big deal, kind of Dracula epic.
Serious,
Francis Ford Coppola. And you got Anthony Hopkins, Keanu Reeves when he was a hot and just first starting out in his career,
doing the worst British accent you've ever heard.
Same thing with Winona Ryder, Gary Oldman. It's just like it was a kind of a cultural milestone of almost 30 years ago. So I'm excited to kind of take a look back. Some things have stood the test of time. Some things have not. But it'll be a lot to talk about, I think.
Yeah. And speaking of things that have stood the test of time, if you have stuck with us all the way to the end of the show, thank you for listening. Sincerely, we appreciate it. If you liked what you heard, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, right? That down there below wherever you're listening to podcasts, maybe above or to the right or the left. I don't really know where you're listening to the show. We're available on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Play. We're on iHeartMedia. We're in all the usual places you get your podcast. So if you have the means, just drop a subscription. You're doing us a big favor. And if possible, leave us a rating and review too. That would be huge. It would help us a bunch. In fact, rate and review all the podcasts you listen to, not just us. It's a big deal for us podcasters. Helps us out a bunch. If you like listening to the show, you can follow us on Facebook, where we live stream the show every single Tuesday at 5 p.m.-ish CST. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or on YouTube, where we post our live streams. And of course, we post all our episodes on audio as well, wherever you can get them. So do us a solid and, subscribe to the show. It'd mean a lot. Also, you can write in. I know I mentioned that earlier during our, I think it was during Without Remorse. I was talking about that. So if you want to write into the show, you can email us at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com. You can drop a comment on Facebook, Twitter. You can DM one of us on either of those sites or at Offscript Film Review. Got it. Almost anywhere you go, you'll find an account for us, and you can check us out there. And, let us know what you thought of the movies. Let us know about things that you're excited about that's coming up. If you got any hot takes on the Two Distant Strangers controversy for the Oscars, maybe we totally missed the mark on Without Remorse. I don't know. Just weigh in. Engage with us a little bit. I promise we will more than likely read your correspondence on the air. We love talking to listeners, so thank you for listening. Without further ado, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for listening. I was supposed to say the Off-Script Film Review, the home of Bold Cinema, the Draper, Zach.
Oh my
listening.
God.
Perfect. Thanks.
Got it.
Got it. Ah!